For November 4th, 2000, Biography with Jack Perkins.
One of these men is about to be elected President of the United States, which means that one of these women will be at his side as America's First Lady. Tonight, Biography looks at both women, one of whom will soon have a new address, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. It's a high-profile position with no job description, not even an official title. The president's wife has always been able to shape the position to suit her own personality and intentions. Some have preferred to remain in the background, careful not to step out of the president's shadow. Others have used the position as a base to expand their own power and influence. The current First Ladies in waiting come from different backgrounds and have different personalities. One is a Washington veteran, familiar with the rough and tumble of a national campaign. The other, seemingly more reserved, a woman who prefers fine literature to the fine art of political hardball. Well, tonight, Biography looks at the lives of both, beginning with the current Second Lady. Al Gore calls his wife his closest advisor and friend, but Tipper Gore has always been more than just a supportive wife.
Tipper was very cheerful, fun-loving, a prankster. She reminds people of themselves. She's not a star.
Tipper brings out the relaxed side of Al Gore.
She's a genuine person. What you see is exactly what you get.
She's very approachable, very down-to-earth.
She's quiet, she's reserved, she's very calm.
She has really become an accomplished politician. She's a very good speaker.
Deserve a leader who inspires us to dream bigger and do more.
In 1948, Washington, D.C. was the center of the free world, and Harry Truman, faced with the chaos at the end of World War II, was running for a second term. The same year, not far from the White House, Mary Elizabeth Aitchison was born on August 19th. She was nicknamed Tipper after a lullaby her mother sang to her. Tipper's mother, Margaret Carlson Odom, had been a war widow at 22 and then married Jack Aitchison, the owner of a successful plumbing supply store, in 1947. But that marriage didn't last, and Tipper was just 1 year old when Margaret took her back to her parents' house in Arlington and got a job as an accountant.
I have enormous respect for her because the fact that she was a working woman back in the day when that was not common. She's a very courageous person. She feels very strongly about something and she's very passionate about it. And I think that that has translated into her daughter as well.
Throughout Tipper's childhood, her mother suffered from periodic deep depressions and suffered them in silence for fear of being stigmatized.
I didn't understand it very much, and I was very sheltered by the adults in my life, both sets of grandparents and my father and others. They also would tell me, you know, your mother's sick and she will be getting well. You can imagine the worry that a child feels in that situation. She would come home to this very kind of unsettled environment, which at the same time, though, people who have been there describe as quite loving.
It was the 50s, and Tipper was an only child at a time when divorce still carried a stigma, and she felt lonely at times. But then, when she was 8 years old, the first of her 2 cousins was born. They became like sisters to her. When Tipper was 10, her grandfather died. The house was now home to 3 generations of women, headed by Tipper's strong but loving grandmother.
There was always a lot of laughter going on in the house. I can hear to this day my mother's laugh, my grandmother's laugh, and my aunt's laughter emanating throughout the house.
Tipper went to the all-girls Episcopal school, St. Agnes, where sports interested her more than books and grades. She excelled in badminton and was the captain of the field hockey team. Like many teenagers, she also liked rock and roll and was the drummer in an all-girl band, which was called the Wildcats, after her mother's Buick.
We would just play those songs that I would get my mother, who was working downtown, to buy me at the end of the week, and that would be a great treat when she would come home on Fridays with whatever hit record there was that week.
As a teenager, Tipper was a fun-loving prankster. She was a popular girl and had no shortage of boyfriends. But in 1965, at the age of 16, she went to a graduation dance at the St. Albans School. There she met Al Gore, the son of the senior senator from Tennessee. And that was it. Before Al went off to Harvard, they started dating. It was obvious to everyone they were in love.
I remember the time he rode his motorcycle from Boston back to Washington, D.C. He did. Yes, he rode the motorcycle straight through. I think he was in a big hurry to get back to see Tipper.
After her graduation from St. Agnes, Tipper joined Al in Boston to study psychology at Boston University. Like most campuses in the 60s, BU was rife with civil rights fervor and protests against the Vietnam War. It was a time of activism that left a lifelong impression on Tipper.
Every college student in Boston was an activist in one way or another, and most of us did oppose the war in our home. I mean, people always talked about politics. So it was very natural then, I think, to feel as though I could be a part of the generation that could make our views known.
Before Al graduated from Harvard in 1969, he proposed to Tipper, who was only a junior. Tipper finished her studies while Al, facing the draft, joined the Army and started basic training. The next year, shortly after Tipper's graduation, they were married at National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. The city girl, Tipper, was now part of the Gore family, which had its roots in rural Carthage, Tennessee.
When Tipper first went down to visit them in Carthage, she got up the first morning. She was all made up, mascara, makeup, very well dressed. And I think that both of the Gore parents were taken aback.
Initially, Tipper's mother-in-law, Pauline, is reported to have said that Tipper was the sweetest blonde thing. But she proved to be more than that.
Tipper could have come in and been dominated by her, but there's no competition, and there's no one-upsmanship, because Tipper has that ability to get along with anybody she respects and find ways to make them comfortable with her.
Al and Tipper started married life near Fort Rucker, Alabama, where Al was stationed.
Our first home was a trailer, and it was lot number 10, Horsley Trailer Court, Fort Rucker, Alabama, and we had to find housing off the base because he wasn't an officer. He was a specialist in the Army. But it was great. It was a very happy time as well.
But two worrisome events were hanging over them. Al's father, who opposed the war in Vietnam, was fighting an uphill battle for a fourth term as senator. His campaign would be Tipper's first taste of life in politics, and it was bitter. Al Sr. lost. A month later, Al went off to the war as a reporter for the Army. Casualty reports and body counts were standard fare on the evening news.
Saigon reported 5 American combat deaths in its latest weekly casualty report. 11 other U.S. servicemen died of what were described as non-hostile causes. In the war today, enemy troops kept up their attacks against South Vietnamese.
But Al, who was not in frontline combat, came home unscathed after a 6-month stint in Vietnam. The couple settled on a farm in Carthage near the senior Gores, but commuted to Nashville, where Al got a job as a newspaper reporter at the Tennessean. His colleagues were charmed by Tipper.
She was gorgeous, and she was funny, and she had a great smile. And I said, Al, you know how lucky you are? He said, yep.
The handsome young couple became a family in August 1973, when Tipper gave birth to their daughter, Corinna.
And Al is exhausted. Tipper is up. She's excited. I want to see the baby. Where's the baby? And it's like she'd just gotten out of bed and was ready to go.
She had enough energy to take classes in photography once a week. One of her assignments was to photograph somebody you love. Tipper caught Al shaving.
Al Gore is a very handsome man, but he rarely looks sexy. And the picture she takes of him capture something that nobody else seems to be able to capture.
Tipper's skills with a camera led to a part-time job at the Tennessean, where she started out as a lab assistant.
She just plunged right in and got her hands up to her elbows in all those chemicals and mixing them. And she began to shoot pictures on her day off. She had a lot of initiative, and you're always looking for that in any journalist, photojournalist.
Tipper successfully combined work with motherhood. She was quickly promoted to photographer and was looking forward to a successful career in photojournalism. But then Al changed everything.
She thought that they were going to kind of live out these very idyllic lives, that he might be a writer and that she would be a photographer. So when he gets a phone call and comes home and announces that I'm going to run for Congress, Tipper says it was like a bomb.
So she was just really sad looking and just looks like he was going to break down in tears. And so she said, well, I've just, my whole career, I'm doing so well, and what am I going to do?
Tipper has always supported Al in anything he's wanted to do. So when he decided to run, she backed him 100%.
Tipper, assured that her job would be kept open, put her own career aside and started campaigning for Al throughout the state.
At first, she was frightened and nervous, and she had to make speeches to ladies' Democratic clubs and all those kind of things. And of course, nobody in their right mind would want to do that to begin with. But I mean, you know, it's something that politicians have to do. So I think she learned very quickly.
Al won the election, but his victory meant a big change in their lives. Tipper said goodbye to her job.
When one door closes, as they say, another one opens, and I think that this one opened probably bigger and brighter than the one that closed.
So Tipper, Al, and Corinna moved back to Washington, to her old neighborhood. She was home again, but her life had changed completely. Her great challenge now would be to maintain some sense of a normal life.
You're watching The Next First Lady on Biography.
Let's hear it for the lady. The one whose work is never done. Without you, none of us would even be here. Here's to you, Mom, from a car with the right stuff to get you through it all. Chevy Malibu, the car you depend on every day. Just like you, we'll be there.
The new economy won't be like the old new economy. The new economy will have new ideas. Ideas like profitability. With powerful e-business solutions, the new economy will be about how well you run your e-business, not just how well you promote it. SAP.
I adopted Cece at 5 months old. We have something special. I can't explain. We're always there for each other, and Purina Cat Chow is always there for us. More than great nutrition, Purina Cat Chow gives us access to behaviorists, nutritionists, and vets who can help us with all kinds of cat questions. Thanks to Purina Cat Chow brand, Cece's healthier and happier, aren't you?
Physical, emotional, complete. That's the Purina Cat Chow way of life.
"68 perfect shades of white." From Ralph Lauren. Paint. Find them all at the Home Depot. The Thoroughbred Collection. From Ralph Lauren. Paint. Find it at the Home Depot.
You're watching Tipper Gore on Biography.
In 1977, Tipper Gore was living with her husband, Al, the freshman congressman from Tennessee, in the house in Arlington, Virginia, where she had grown up. But it was not an easy life.
We had a second child. We had a third child not too long after that. So I found myself being a young mother with children and a husband that was very dedicated to his career, going back to Tennessee most every single weekend.
It can be very lonely because it is very easy for a member to become wrapped up in the issue of the day, to become involved with his staff. In Washington, if you're married to an important person, it's easy to be the spouse of. We didn't want to be the June Cleaver of Leave It to Beaver, but wanted to study the issues, wanted to be informed, and wanted to make a difference.
So Tipper and other political wives formed the Congressional Wives Task Force to stay involved in current issues. And she resumed photography as a freelancer and had a darkroom built in her house.
One thing the children learned was to knock on that door before they opened it when Mommy was in the darkroom.
The Gores had a fourth child and first son, Albert, in 1982. Their routine changed again in 1984 when Al decided to try for the Senate and swept through Tennessee. Tipper, loyal as usual, campaigned with him, and Gore was elected with 61% of the vote, the highest percentage in Tennessee history. It was a sweet moment for Al and Tipper.
I have a special place in my heart for one rare and precious person who has borne with me, giving loving care to our 4 children, and yet personally campaigning in all of Tennessee's 95 counties, my wife, Tipper.
Soon after the election, it was Tipper who was in the news.
She is co-founder of the Parents Music Resource Center.
Tipper had been a rock music fan since childhood. But rock had changed. The lyrics were now often violent and sexually explicit. So in 1985, she and other concerned mothers formed an advocacy group called the Parents Music Resource Center. Its call for warning labels on records was met instantly with charges of censorship.
Now these people are going, oh, sex, it's going to kill us all.
The rock star, Frank Zappa, was among her most persistent opponents in the debate that turned into a firestorm of criticism.
It shocked her. She was really unprepared for this. She said, we were just a bunch of housewives meeting in the kitchen who were concerned about what our children were listening to and viewing.
In September 1985, Tipper was verbally assaulted by punk rocker Wendy O. Williams when both of them participated in a panel on explicit lyrics in New York. Williams was merciless.
She would ask Mrs. Gore questions, you know, when do you think children should be able to masturbate? And isn't it really true that you're just afraid your own children are going to masturbate?
It turned out to be quite raucous, and I can remember leaving and just feeling quite, you know, sort of alone, and I thought, wow, you know, I mean, I think I took a cab back to the airport by myself. It was raining.
She described it as, later, as the worst night in her life.
Tipper and rock stars would clash again soon, this time in the United States Senate, where they all argued their case before a panel of 17 senators, Tipper's husband, Al Gore, among them.
I bought the Purple Rain album for our 11-year-old, and I didn't know that Darling Nikki was on it, and I felt that it was inappropriate for her and her 8- and 6-year-old sister to hear a song describing a girl masturbating in a hotel lobby with a magazine. A voluntary labeling is not censorship.
The PMRC proposal is an ill-conceived piece of nonsense which fails to deliver any real benefits to children.
The PMRC wanted warnings against sadomasochism, as in songs by Twisted Sister.
I can say categorically that the only sadomasochism, bondage, and rape in this song is in the mind of Ms. Gore.
Tipper became the favorite target of critics, but she kept up the pressure.
Tipper was raised with, by strong women, and she was never told, no, she couldn't do something, and nothing was going to stop her when she knew it was the right thing to do.
In 1987, she published a book called Raising PG Kids in an X-Rated Society. She was in the middle of a publicity tour for her book when again, Al's career took precedence. She stopped promoting her book and went on the stump to promote Al. But the controversy surrounding her did not go away.
Al supported her and talked to her about it and told her to go ahead, even though some were fearful that it might alienate some of Al's constituency.
Al won 7 primaries, but it was Michael Dukakis who won the nomination as the Democratic presidential candidate. Al continued in the Senate, but the following year their lives were upended by a terrible accident. After the Orioles' 1989 opening game in Baltimore, 6-year-old Albert Gore III suddenly slipped away from his parents and was hit by a car. Thrown 30 feet, his legs and ribs were broken and his internal organs crushed.
Something like that, you know, that just scares the daylights out of you.
It was just a very, very critical time in everybody's life.
Albert Jr. eventually recovered fully, but the experience had taken its toll. More than a year later, Tipper became depressed, as her mother had.
It's kind of like running out of gas, in a sense. In fact, I try to describe it to people that way, that, you know, if your tank goes completely on empty, you really have to do something. And in my case, I got the right diagnosis, I got medication, and recovered.
Still, the family crisis had been so serious that Al decided not to be a contender in the 1992 presidential race.
We're having a terrific visit here in New York.
But there was a new challenge for the Gores that year.
Understand very clearly who that line applies to.
Al was chosen by Bill Clinton to be his running mate. The Gores and the Clintons campaigned together and proved a formidable team.
I, Albert Gore, Jr., do solemnly swear.
In January 1993, Al was sworn in, and Tipper became the second lady of the land, and was, as always, Al's most trusted advisor.
Tipper doesn't really talk or try to advise Al Gore about policy matters per se. Al Gore tends to get lost in the details and the technicalities of things, and the role that she plays with him is to sort of say, you know, let's step back for a second. How do you feel about this? How do I feel about it? So she gets him to go to the root of the issue.
But Tipper's influence did not stop with Al. She had her own causes.
Well, on behalf of the VA Community Clinic, I'd like to present you this plaque.
Thank you.
For a long time, she had personally worked with the homeless and called attention to their problems.
She will stand up for the underdog. And if someone is trying to squash you, she will be there in your corner supporting you. And that's where you will see the fire underneath her.
Now, she used her position of vice presidential wife to help change the way society views the mentally ill, and was a major force behind the 1999 White House Conference on Mental Health.
It's a risky and potentially even a dangerous issue to get involved with. There's a tremendous stigma still attached to mental illness.
We must end the discrimination that those with a mental illness feel.
She thinks it's important, she feels she can make a difference, and she throws herself into it and wants to be directly a part of it.
And she is. Out of the reach of the press, she volunteers at community programs like the Green Door.
You would never know she was the vice president's wife by the way she acts. Working in the kitchen, in the dining hall, helping to prepare lunch. She's so down to earth in it, and yet she understands what her position is. But you don't get any sense of standoffishness with her at all.
As the wife of the vice president, Tipper has innumerable official duties, from decorating the national Christmas tree to representing America abroad.
Go through the whole thing again.
But, she says, family comes first. Rather than squeeze her family into her schedule of duties, she fits her duties around her family.
He makes the decision.
And photography remains a very important element in her life.
What I like about it is you can get in and out of many different realities. It's very interesting to have an instrument or a vehicle in which to really go into different realities and learn from people about themselves and about their situation. And that's something that allows me to express a part of myself that is just me.
But Tipper's existence, monitored by the Secret Service and scheduled by handlers, is barely her own.
Please welcome my husband, our thanks President of the United States, Al Gore.
She's the person who can really bring out the human side of Al Gore. Tipper has always tried to guard her privacy and live a normal life. But if Al Gore is elected president, that will be more difficult than ever.
In Washington, people are constantly tugging you in various directions. Nobody's tugged Tipper anywhere that she didn't want to be, and that defined her as something that she's not.
The word I use for Tipper Gore is real. There just isn't anything false about her. She's not going to be a typical First Lady. She's going to be real. She's going to be herself. And she's not going to fit anybody's mold or anybody's stereotype.
You're watching The Next First Lady on Biography.
The drawing rooms of London had not prepared us for this new world. We were overcome by the very fruits and birds and trees.
British classics.
The air was thick with perfume.
A marriage of Victorian elegance and Caribbean soul.
The seduction was complete. It changed us forever.
With the simple finance plan, you can enter the world of British classics gracefully. Only at Ethan Allen.
This new mobile internet, they say it's going to change my life. Well, but I like my life.
Dave, it's going to change some things you don't like. No wires, no waiting. The internet services you want, wherever you are.
So you won't change the good things?
You'll still have those.
Anchovies on pizza?
Still be there.
Ice hockey?
Absolutely.
Feel of leather on naked skin?
That's important to you, Dave?
When was the last time someone remembered your name, your preference for wine, or that you like your sea bass blackened and your prime rib rare? When was the last time the only difficult choice was steel drums or string quartet? And when was the last time you celebrated all night just because it's Tuesday? Holland America, it's time.
Susan, best office manager we ever had. Look, laminated, color-coded little pockets. Pentaflex brand hanging folders, everyone guaranteed for life. Only the best for Susan. Now she's gone. Run off to Hollywood. Movie stars, parties, limousines.
You can win a trip to Hollywood for awards night from Pentaflex, the world's most reliable filing system.
Bill from accounting ordered some bargain brand hanging folders. This isn't Pentaflex. See what you've done, Mr. Hollywood? Susan!
Pentaflex hangs tough.
You're watching The Next First Lady on Biography. Welcome back to Biography and our profile of the women hoping to become America's next First Lady. Throughout this campaign, Laura Bush has been perceived as the calm in the storm. She's a former librarian. She never sought the spotlight, but she hates being called shy. She prefers reserved. Today, Laura Bush is celebrating her 54th birthday. No doubt wishing for a special present next Tuesday.
Midland, Texas is pretty much in the middle of nowhere. It stands as a symbol of the boom and the bust and the boom again of the oil business. Oil was first discovered out here in the Permian Basin in the 1920s. Folks from around the country flocked here in search of fortune and opportunity. To many, Midland was utopia.
It's a very unique place, very isolated, and in a sense, a very sheltered city. It really was like a Norman Rockwell existence. People left their doors unlocked because they weren't afraid of someone coming in. They left their keys in the ignition of the car.
Everybody knew everybody, so everybody cared about everybody, and it felt very safe. Very safe. Just, you know, you could go out at night, and we'd sleep in the backyard.
Laura Welch was born in Midland in 1946, the only child of Harold and Jenna. Harold was a builder who made a good living from Midland's booming construction business. Jenna was a traditional housewife and an active volunteer in the community.
Jenna was always in the kitchen, and she was one of the moms, as many were in those days, that fixed breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And Harold Bruce, Laura's dad, came home for lunch. He really was a jolly fella. He was so much fun, and he teased everybody.
Laura was a quiet girl. She inherited a love of books from her mother, who read to her each night. With no brothers or sisters, she played with dolls, arranging them in rows and reading to them.
My parents were being parents, and I think I felt very sheltered and very protected with them as parents. I really didn't get in a lot of trouble. I think because I was an only child, I felt a real responsibility to please my parents and not cause them any trouble.
She grew up the center of attention, definitely not spoiled, which would be hard to do with an only child, but very loved, and that gives a person a very good sense of self and a wonderful security, and you sense that when you're with her.
Midland was an easy place to grow up. The Welch's life revolved around family, friends, and church.
It's a town where you went to church on Sunday. I sang in the church choir, went to church choir practice one afternoon a week from when I was in the 2nd grade till when I was in high school. Friday night football was really the center of social activity in Midland. Everyone went to the Friday night football games.
At Lee High School, Laura was a popular but reserved student. She was active in school functions, involved in student council and the yearbook. Good grades came easily since she was naturally studious and loved to read.
She wasn't a cheerleader. She didn't care about being front and center or being the person everybody was paying attention to. She was not one to try to call attention to herself. While we were in high school, we'd all go out in the evenings, and Laura would always want to be the last one picked up so she could kind of finish reading that chapter in her book.
It was the late 1950s and early 60s. Free time was spent with friends cruising the wide streets of Midland and listening to music.
Laura and I grew up at the time that I feel like music really just came on the scene. I mean, Elvis Presley, Buddy Holly, the Everly Brothers. And you would go to Agnes's or the Sonic, wherever the place was, where everybody was hanging out. It really was like American Graffiti, only not such a big city.
At the age of 17, this life took an abrupt turn for Laura. While out driving one night with a girlfriend, she accidentally ran a stop sign and hit another car. Laura walked away with minor injuries, but the driver of the other car was killed. It turned out the other driver was her close friend and classmate, Mike Douglas. It was such a painful experience, Laura and her friends find it difficult to discuss.
My life. I think I learned then how precious life is. And as I got older and had my own children, I learned, you know, even more what a tragedy that was.
It was really a tragic, tragic accident that saddened everybody. And I'm sure it had an effect on everybody. But I wouldn't presume to say what effect it had on her. We all just pulled together and supported one another and moved on in our lives.
Laura graduated from high school shortly after the accident and moved to Dallas to attend Southern Methodist University. There she joined a sorority and became a debutante. But unlike many of her contemporaries who married right after college, Laura took her degree in education and went to work in an elementary school.
She loved teaching. She taught at low-income schools in Dallas and Houston, and she loved her students.
But it turned out she loved books most of all. After 4 years of teaching, she left to pursue a master's degree to become a librarian. Landing a job with the Houston Public Library, Laura moved to the Chateau Dijon apartment complex with some friends. Coincidentally, George W. Bush was living in the same complex. But he lived on the boisterous side of the building while she was in the quiet wing. Their paths did not cross, but it wouldn't be long before George W. Bush would change Laura's life completely.
For the web's best bios, log on to biography.com.
Curel delivers more moisture than Eucerin and Lubriderm. Dermatologists recommend it. Curel heals dry skin better. Women who try it agree. You can see the cure in Curel.
Subscribe to Barron's for 13 weeks for just $39 and get this stock evaluator free. It lets your computer help you turn money into wealth.
Call 800-847-7200. That's 800-847-7200 for Barron's. It's how money becomes wealth.
Ding dong!
there, neighbors. We know you're busy unpacking, so June here's cooked you up a real feast. Turkey meatloaf.
Actually, we're vegetarians.
Both. But don't be silly. Everybody loves meatloaf.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Ameritrade, huh? Yeah, we invest online, too.
Oh, now, this is pretty.
Oh, hey, don't mind us. You know, we only pay 29 bucks a trade.
We only pay $8 a trade.
Honey, we got a couple of tadpoles in our hands.
You see, kids, $8 a trade is all fine and dandy, but what else do you get? You can bet your patootie. Not much. Not much, except email alerts.
24-hour customer service, free research, but you probably knew that already.
Who are those people?
I'm Jack.
I'm June. Oh,
We're the
Johnson.
Open a cash account with $500 and get 25 internet equity trades commission-free in the first month. Go to Ameritrade.com. Ameritrade. It's how you get somewhere on Wall Street.
On the next Biography Close-Up.
The adrenaline factor in sports is exactly the same as the adrenaline factor in politics.
What was the toughest part about running?
Bottom line, not enough money.
So you want to be president on Biography Close-Up, Monday on A&E.
Introducing something totally new from Verizon Wireless. It's called New Every 2. We'll give you a new digital phone up to $100 value every 2 years for free when you sign up for a 2-year agreement. So you'll always have the latest in wireless technology. It's never been easier to keep up with what's new. New Every 2, only from Verizon Wireless. Join in.
Equality before the law. That's Nebraska's state motto, carved in stone on our Capitol building. It means Nebraska treats everyone the same. On November 7th, you'll be asked to change that motto. Equality for some, not equality for all. Vote against Initiative 416. It's a bad amendment. It's not really about marriage. It's bigotry and discrimination, plain and simple. Be against discrimination. Vote against 416.
Biography's look at Laura Bush continues on A&E.
In 1977, Laura Welch was living in Houston, happily working as a librarian and enjoying her independence. She never lacked dates, but wasn't ready to settle down.
She dated several guys that I think probably would have liked to marry her, but I never got the impression they were the one for her.
She went on, got her career, got her degree, was, you know, a librarian and loved it, and she was prepared to take care of herself for the rest of her life.
In the summer of 1977, Laura went home to Midland to see her parents. Also in Midland at that time was George W. Bush, eldest son of the prominent political family. He'd grown up in Midland too, but hadn't lived there since he was a teenager. Following in his father's footsteps, George W. was looking to hit it big in the oil business. He was also making a name for himself on the social circuit, where he was known as a colorful and quirky character.
George W. was well known in town almost as soon as he got there as being kind of a young, carefree lad, as he's described himself. A very unpretentious seeming guy in some ways. He would wear mismatched socks. He'd scotch tape the tassels of his loafers, you know, back onto his loafers after they'd fall off.
George's exuberant personality stood in sharp contrast to Laura's serene and reserved nature. But mutual friends, the O'Neills, felt they'd be a good match.
I think we were literally their last two friends that weren't married. And they'd been trying for a couple of years to introduce us.
You know, one night she finally relented, and George came over too, and
I thought, well, you know, that I probably wouldn't be that interested in George.
Our George was very interested. Laura was a little reticent, but George stayed over at our house past 9:30, or, you know, that night, which is very unusual for him.
And I knew that this was a very unusual person. I didn't know I wanted to marry her that night, but it didn't take long to figure it out.
George was so confident in his decision to marry Laura, he didn't even seek approval from his own parents.
He came to Jeb's baby's christening and came to the door of Jeb's house, and we opened it, and he said, "This is Laura, I'm going to marry her." I mean, it was a very big whirlwind. He fell in love like a ton of bricks.
The news of George and Laura's engagement came as a big surprise, even to many who knew them. Their personalities seem so opposite.
I heard so many people say at that time period, it was almost a minor parlor game. It was like a joke. Who the heck is going to marry George W. Bush? Who's going to marry, as they called him, the bombastic Bushkin? The point being was that he was considered such an over-the-top, almost a character. I mean, a guy with boundless energy. And when people heard that it was Laura Bush, there was almost a sense of disbelief.
I always was fairly reserved and fairly quiet. I had that sort of personality. One thing that really attracted me to George when I met him was that he was such an extrovert.
Friends and family quickly saw that their differences were complementary. George was full of life. He made Laura laugh, and Laura was a calming, stabilizing force for George.
I think he probably saw something practical in her. Hey, she'd be good for me. If I choose to go forward in public life, this is the kind of woman who would be an asset.
But the chemistry between them, you could see, was perfect, because she was quiet and he was sort of center stage, and she thought he was funny, and he was very attentive to her.
Their wedding took place in November of 1977 in Midland, just 3 months after they had met. It was a small, low-key, joyous affair. Before meeting Laura, George W. had decided to follow in his father's path and run for Congress. This meant their honeymoon was spent on the campaign trail.
I'm George Bush, running for the Congress. I'm George Bush, and I see you running for the Congress.
While George had grown up in a political family, Laura had little interest in politics. She was unprepared and more than a little wary of her role as a political wife.
I told her, I said, if you marry me, you won't have to give any speeches, because she was worried about giving speeches. And about halfway through the congressional campaign, she got invited to Level Land, Texas, and had to give a speech. And the only thing she knew to say was, you know, my husband told me I would never have to give a speech, and here I am giving a speech, so much for political promises, but he's a good man, and then sat down.
Laura got some tips on life as a political wife from a woman with some experience, her new mother-in-law, Barbara Bush.
She said to me, don't criticize George's speeches. That she had criticized her George's speech recently, and he'd come home for weeks later with letters saying that it was the best speech he'd ever given. But I took her advice until one night we were driving home from Lubbock to Midland, and we turned into our driveway, and George said, tell me the truth. How was my speech? And I said, well, it wasn't that good. And with that, he drove into the garage wall.
George lost that congressional race, and Laura was able to avoid the political world for the time being. What she could not avoid was her new family, in which she now had to define herself.
When she was being accepted into the Bush family, she had a meeting with Dorothy Walker, who was the matriarch of the family and a very powerful, competitive person. Dorothy Walker just flat out said to her, what do you do? And the first thing that Laura Bush could think to say was, I read.
With the congressional campaign behind them, George and Laura settled in Midland and tried to start a family. Despite their efforts, they were unable to conceive for 3 years. They were prepared to adopt when they got the amazing news that Laura was pregnant with twins. Jenna and Barbara were born in 1981. Laura now stayed home to raise their daughters, while George focused on his career in the oil business. Thrilled to have a family of her own, Laura remembers this time with particular fondness.
I actually remember once working in the yard in my house, my little house in Midland. I'd already put the babies to bed. It was still light in the summer, and I could work in the yard, and George was sitting in the backyard reading, and I was gardening, which I love to do, and I remember thinking, this is the life.
They're just wonderful parents. It's sort of like a comedy almost in the house, the way the interaction always is. It's the girls against George, and Laura's sort of observing it all. It's very cute. They have lots of fun.
The Bushes were active in Midland's social life and well known, helped by the fact that George W.'s father was by then vice president. Family life was a priority for the couple, but one of George W.'s old habits lingered, and it was driving a wedge in their otherwise happy marriage.
By most estimations, talking to friends and some family members as well, that George W. and alcohol at some point were a volatile combination, that it would fuel some of the tendencies in him that were ones you just didn't want to see, that were incompatible, in fact, with someone who was really trying to ascend to political office It's been characterized in the past as her saying, look, it's either Jim Beam or me.
Consequently, George quit drinking in 1986 after a 40th birthday celebration with friends.
Alcohol was competing with my energies, and occasionally would have too much, and that's when the quips got me in trouble generally, particularly with my wife.
Laura moved out of Texas for the first time in her life in 1987 when the family moved to Washington. The couple spent 2 years focused on Vice President Bush's successful presidential campaign. By this time, Laura was fully entrenched in the Bush family. They are notorious for their energy and competitive nature, and she's had to carve out her own role.
It's really an interesting dynamic because we have been to Kennebunkport with them before, and she will go in and read books, and the rest of us are assigned to tennis courts, or, you know, it's a very active family. She's a very comfortable person in her own skin.
Laura laughs, smiles at all of us, I'm afraid, but Laura has a great sense of humor. And
She has a needling sense of humor that puts her husband in place, and that's something I think not many people know.
In 1988, George and Laura moved to Dallas. George became a managing partner of the Texas Rangers baseball team, offering him the high profile that would make his future political life possible. Laura was quickly absorbed by the Dallas charity circuit, where the Bushes became a regular fixture.
Bush, a successful businessman with deep roots in Texas.
Then in 1994, a group of friends convinced George to make a try for the governor's mansion.
I'm running for governor to change the state. We can right the wrongs in Texas.
Laura thought he needed some help with his image.
I think he thought that was fun to wear polyester suits and things like that. So when he started to run for governor, she says, okay, this is it. You're going to have to buy some clothes. So she went out and sort of orchestrated some suits for him.
George Bush won the election for governor in 1994. Laura suddenly found herself in the public role of First Lady of Texas. She quickly moved to promote reading throughout the state.
Just as reading is a priority in Texas schools, so it should be a priority in every Texas household.
In 1996, she launched a ready-to-read program to prepare preschoolers for reading instruction in elementary school. Her most visible cause has been the Texas Book Festival,
We're about to present the...
which she founded in 1996. It raises money for public libraries throughout the state.
It's a book-intensive literary festival, and she seems very happy in that milieu, in that environment, talking about books, being around writers, being around authors, introducing authors, reading excerpts from books. She seems very, very comfortable and fluid in that world.
Laura also continued her support of rainbow rooms, which provide items like clothing and diapers to children who've been removed from abusive homes.
She's been very successful in the state of Texas. She's very interested in pushing the agenda forward on literacy and reading, on art, on social services, and she knows that she's effective.
She'd never been known to revel in the spotlight, but she grew into her public role. Her speech-making in particular was vastly improved.
She gave a speech in front of all the former First Ladies of Texas and 2 former First Ladies of America, Lady Bird Johnson and my mother. It was a major fundraiser for a charity in Houston, Texas, and I know Laura was nervous as heck about it. But she got up and knocked it out of the park, and I got a lot of phone calls from ladies that had been there and said, wow, your wife was fantastic. And to be able to give a speech in front of Lady Bird and my mother, plus all the other First Ladies of Texas, was a pretty darn tough call, and yet she was fabulous.
Despite her public profile in Texas, Laura worked hard to guard her private life. Shielding her daughters from the press became a particular priority. An inner circle of friends served as her extended family. They celebrated birthdays together with adventurous trips like river rafting in the Grand Canyon. Free time in Austin was spent in more conventional ways.
Her favorite thing to do, I believe, is to go antiquing and have lunch. That's a really nice day, but those are few and far between now.
When George was encouraged in 1999 to run for president, it took some time for Laura to warm to the idea. She knew whatever privacy they had would vanish.
Well, I just think it's a major life change. We have a very nice life in Texas.
She says the example set by the elder Bushes is what convinced her. In her eyes, they had successfully juggled their public and private lives.
Ladies and gentlemen, our favorite First Lady of Texas, Laura Bush.
Now she found herself in a role she'd never hoped or prepared for.
You're watching The Next First Lady on Biography.
Introducing the Acura MDX, taking the SUV to a place it's never been before.
I can tell my stepdaughter feels like we have nothing in common.
How's your day? Pretty good.
I think we're kind of feeling each other out still.
Can I call you back?
We do share one thing, my clothes. She loves borrowing them, but she always manages to drip something all over them.
Introducing Tide Kick. Measure out the new Deep Clean formula, treat your stains, toss it into wash. It eliminates more of your stains than any leading pre-treater and regular detergent combined.
A year from now, I'd like to think we're just really good friends.
See, the video game signals the refrigerator and the robot dog brings it to me. It's got digital DNA technology from Motorola. So you outsourced it? Strategic alliance, Susie. They help streamline the board design, you know, chips, systems, software. Did you hit your market window? Totally. Is it scalable? Yeah, and upgradable. Wow.
We're helping some of the world's smartest companies create the world's smartest products.
Does the dog have a name?
We're going to put a few in front of consumers next week.
Digital DNA from Motorola, the heart of smart.
Now you can subscribe to Biography magazine for almost 50% off the newsstand price. 12 issues for only $19.97. Call 1-800-901-2233 to order Biography magazine.
Beauty, adventure, drama. All these and more can be yours in the wonderful world of art. And with this free art test from Art Instruction Schools, you can find out if you have the interest and desire needed to become a serious art student. To get your free art test without cost or obligation, call this toll-free number. Don't delay. Call this toll-free number now. Call 1-800-847-7200.
Biography's look at Laura Bush continues on A&E.
George W. Bush decided to seek the presidency in 1999. Laura Bush was thrust onto the national stage.
I first decided to become a teacher. When I was in the 2nd grade.
She'd been happy to stay on the sidelines for years. Now her life was put under a microscope. Her politics, never an issue in the past, became the subject of curiosity.
Sure.
People want to know whether she shares the same views as her husband.
We don't agree on every issue, of course. I mean, what married couple does agree on every issue? But the fact is, we've been married long enough that I think even if we don't agree on an issue, we understand why the other one has the point of view that they have. And since I'm not running for office, I haven't felt any obligation to tell what the Laura Bush platform is.
Laura has chosen to play the same role in this campaign as she has throughout their marriage, supportive wife. She says she has no interest in advising George on policy, but her influence is palpable.
I believe that George W. actually softens physically when his wife is nearby, even in the same room. I've seen him make eye contact with her, sense her presence, sense her coming into the room, and I've actually seen almost the energy level drop from maybe a dangerous, precipitous level down to a more maintainable level.
When she thinks I'm stepping out of line or not quite as humble as I should be, or I wouldn't say tough, but she's firm. Laura's not a tough person, but she's a very strong person. She's a very, she's got good opinions about things, and she's got good common sense.
Laura says she has enjoyed campaigning with her husband, but it is clear that she would be just as content to stay home.
I think she still feels uncomfortable about her entry into public life, that it was just never the thing that she woke up with the first thing in the morning saying, you know what I really want to do in life? I really want to be a public figure.
She says she's happiest spending free time with family and friends at their new ranch outside of Waco, where they are building a house. In this low-key environment, she is the most relaxed.
In private, she's a little bit like the governor, where they like the old clothes.
Friends say that Laura Bush is the same easygoing person they have always known, and will remain so if she becomes First Lady.
She's very approachable. She is very down-to-earth and very easygoing. I don't think you'll find anybody anywhere that doesn't like her.
She is a valuable partner, friend, wife, and love, and she's going to make a great First Lady.
First ladies have ranged from nearly invisible to virtual co-president. When Woodrow Wilson suffered a stroke, his wife Edith basically ran the country, for which, once the country realized it, she was either credited or criticized. There is a sense that neither Tipper Gore nor Laura Bush will ever be accused of wanting to run the country. The next First Lady, be it Mrs. Bush or Mrs. Gore, will likely focus on her own family, on promoting her own special causes, and of course on helping her husband in any way possible. Monday on Biography, we will present the life stories of both George Bush and Al Gore. A special look at two men the night before one of them is elected president. Vice President Gore, Governor Bush, Monday on Biography. For A&E, I'm Jack Perkins. Thanks for watching.
Dear Mom, I've lost control. The boys have taken me hostage. Help. Now.
Mail Station. Email without the PC. By Sidco.
Hurry, the sun. I can't handle this thing!
It's times like these, I wish I had a Pontiac Grand Prix.
Nothing tracks the road quite like wide track handling.
Should we stop?
Not in this neighborhood.
Wider is better. The wide track Grand Prix. To the innocent, all seems safe. But for those who remember,
It's happening again.
the nightmare has only just begun.
Can you find her?
It's a mystery to die for. On DL and Pasco. Next, only on A&E.
If seeing is believing, just look at us now.
Hit as hard as you can.
An exclusive premiere. Brad Pitt, wow. Edward Norton.
Who do you think I am?
Fight Club. See it Sunday, November 5th. Best, most, Max. Cinemax. Call now to view Cinemax free for 30 days. Call 933-3000.
Know where I'm going and I know what to do. Ooh, I gotta do attitude.
Introducing something totally new from Verizon Wireless. It's called New Every 2. We'll give you a new digital phone up to $100 value every 2 years for free when you sign up for a 2-year agreement. So you'll always have the latest in wireless technology. It's never been easier to keep up with what's new. New Every 2, only from Verizon Wireless. Join in.
Now you can subscribe to Biography magazine for almost 50% off the newsstand price. 12 issues for only $19.97. Call 1-800-901-2233 to order Biography magazine.
Now, a freakish folktale turns into a night.